Hello, everybody. My name is Jamal Brown, and this show is called I the Creative, where we focus on creatives, whether they rap, sing, dance, make toys, like my guest here today.
Hello.
My guest here today is a toy maker, and we're going to get into his history and find out some of the things that were good, bad, ugly, happy, sad, the whole spectrum of what it is to create a company, sell a company, and all of these different aspects of being a businessman in the fashion industry and so forth. How you doing today, Mr. Shane Neilson?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be here, and I'm having fun. I'm learning something new about the campus. Never been here before.
Well, this is it. This is a CTVR program.
Yeah, it's super cool. So feeling good and ready to share my wild and wacky story of being a toy designer, a plush toy designer.
Well, what was your background? Where did you actually start prior to becoming a toy maker?
Well, I mean, I'm 53 years old right now, so I have, quite a story about what it was that I wanted to do and all the thoughts that popped into my head as a young person and someone who felt that they were a creative person. But, living a normal life, like, many young people, you're discouraged from looking at the arts or, looking at design. And, my mother was a teacher, my father was a fireman. And, they were pragmatic thinkers. They thought that, that maybe I would follow in their footsteps. I know my father wanted me to be a fireman at one point, and that wasn't something I was interested in doing. But I had this affinity for like little helpless things. And that was kind of like a narrative that ran through me all the time, like a little bird that needed help and I would go and help it, or a dog that was hit by a car and I was like, we've got to save it, and like I would, we could be on the way to Disneyland with the whole family. I'm like, Mom, that dog is limping, like we need to go help it. And so what started kind of manifesting in me was that maybe I wanted to work in animal sciences somehow, or somehow become a veterinarian. That kind of seemed to make sense. Mm-hmm. And that was exciting from my parents. My mom, she was like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Okay, we can get behind that, not thinking about all of the school and all that it would take to do. But as time went on, really the only thing that it ever turned into was that I worked at a pet store.
Okay, I know how that goes. Like, right. I know these film guys, and they want to be movie makers, and I'll go see a movie, and they're doing popcorn at the movie theater because that's their end. Like,
and that's okay too. You kind of just fall. You let the chips fall where they may, and then you make the most of it. So,
yes, sir.
I worked at a pet store, and there were moments where I was giving vaccines. Mm-hmm. So, that was kind of back in the day when you could do that. And I thought, oh, that's kind of medical, and then they made me a manager, and then I thought, I feel like I could do more, so I worked at the animal hospital. Mm-hmm. And then the first thing they had me doing was cleaning dog cages. And I'm like, oh, wow, like I was like an assistant manager at a pet store, and now I'm cleaning up, a huge mess from this dog that has parvo. But I just kind of said, I'm okay. Like, I'm alive, I've got a job, I'm living in Southern California, and things are good. So I just would always sort of make the best of it. And that was a strange experience. If you want to hear it, I'll give it to you a quickie. But I wound up working with a doctor that was addicted to a dog medication. And
hold up. The doctor was addicted to a dog medication?
Yeah, he was addicted to Vicodin.
What is Vicodin?
It's dog Vicodin.
Vicodin is like, what is it, an upper or downer?
It's both, actually. It can make you really, really excited and happy, or it can really bring you down. It kind of accentuates whatever mood you're in. So if you're in a good mood, you're in a great mood. And if you're in a bad mood, you're in a really bad mood. But it helps you.
Sounds like what most drugs or alcohol do to people.
But I know, because I was in a terrible car accident, and I had to take Vicodin many, many years later. And I was like, oh, this is what this doctor was going through. But he became addicted to this chemical. And what was happening is that when we would go into surgery, I used to just scrub the animals and get them ready for surgeries. And then I started intubating them, and then I started drawing their blood and putting in IV catheters, and I started really getting involved. And he would just kind of stand there and sort of be like, yeah, like that.
Because he was high.
Because he was out of his mind, and he couldn't hold a scalpel. So the next thing I know, I'm opening up the midline of a cat, and I'm taking the spay hook, and I'm spaying these cats. And he's just like, oh, this is fine. This is totally normal. We do this here. We do this at this hospital. It's a teaching hospital, whatever. And I didn't know. I was completely naive. So here I was. Everything from weighing the animal and figuring out what its anesthetic dose was going to be, to intubating it, putting it on the table, shaving, scrubbing, and doing the surgery, gowning up, putting on gloves, and actually doing the surgery. So I learned an enormous amount about that field.
Is that doctor still practicing? Is he still alive?
I have no idea. He's probably not even alive anymore. I don't know.
Is that a thing? Is that a thing where
I've heard it before. As I went through the journey of working in the animal medical field, when I would mention that story from time to time, never mentioning that doctor's name out of respect, because he was a super nice guy. I felt terrible for him and his family.
Wow.
But I had heard from other doctors like, oh yeah, and it wasn't just doctors, it was tech assistants and people in the front desk, because you would walk into these rooms and they would be just full of all the medications and really no one was paying attention.
So I suppose that animal medicine is not like watched as much as human medicine.
It is now. But, we worked with ketamine, and ketamine is special K. And you could go into a room and pull out special K. You could pull out ketamine and you could withdraw however much you needed, and you used it for the surgery. You used it to sedate the animal. And then you put it back, and someone might write like, oh, we used 1/2 ml. And I'm like, well, I pulled out 1/2 ml, but sometimes I pull out a little bit more, but no one cared,
Mm-hmm.
And you could see the problems happening. Like there was a point where someone was putting water in place of the ketamine. We would try to anesthetize the dog and it wouldn't do anything. Come to find out, one of the techs was taking the ketamine, was taking it. So it was a complicated world to live in. And then that all got shifted. But by that time, when it started getting crazy, I was approached by someone, a client, who came in and said, I could see you through the door and I could see you gowned up. Are you a doctor? And I said, no. I said, there's just things I know how to do. Mm-hmm. And he said, well, I have a biotech company, or I work for a biotech company, and we're trying to find the cure for diabetes. Do you want to come to our company instead? And I was like, yes, get me out of here. Like, I got to get out of here. So I went and pivoted and I started working with primates. Mm-hmm. And as a result of everything that I had learned, I became the guy. Like, they're like, Shane can do the surgery, which was wild. Because I was just about as close to a human being as you're going to get. These were Rhesus monkeys. And they just looked like little people. And so I would do the whole thing, open them up, pull out the peritoneum, and I would affix this artificial pancreas. I won't go into the details of this artificial pancreas, but essentially it created insulin. And I would put it in there and sew it up, and then we would monitor it, and then I would go home. And they would fly me to these different locations to do this. I would get on a plane in the morning, and I would fly there, and I would go do the surgery. And it seemed really cool. It seemed cool to be on a plane. It seemed cool to be respected, and I was teaching doctors that worked with humans how to do this surgery. I'd be
so you're flying around, you go from cleaning dog crap out of cages to monitoring basically a high doctor who's high off of who's high off of dog medicine.
Dog Vicodin.
Jeez.
To being a surgeon in the animal medical field, but for biotechnology. And in that realm, in biotechnology, it's different because when they own the animals, they control how it works. Once you walk in those doors, you're like, look, we own these animals. We want you to do it. We don't need a veterinarian to do it. We want you to do it. We're going to pay you to do it. And so that's how it works.
You don't have to have all the credentials and everything. You just have to know what you're doing.
Yeah, there was SOPs, there were standard operating procedures that you had to understand. Some of those I wrote myself, and the reason I would write them is because I'd look at their SOPs and I'd be like, yeah, it doesn't work this way. You don't do this with the cannula, and you got to do this, and you got to draw this amount of blood first. And I figured out how to do it, really just by kind of being logical about it, And I found out right away that they didn't know what they were doing. They were just kind of taking stabs in the dark, like, okay, well, we've created this device. It's xenotransplantation, meaning one animal to another animal, so it was coming from pigs and going into primates. And they're like, Shane, figure it out. I was like, okay. And I did. I figured it out. And sometimes it worked and sometimes it didn't. And then one day I realized that that company was a scam too.
Wow.
It was just a venture capitalist scam making an enormous amounts of money. And they really didn't understand how it all worked. And happened is I opened up a Pandora's box when I saw a whole bunch of studies that were never actually completed.
Okay.
And I realized that had those hadn't been completed, that meant that all the information was void.
Ooh.
So I thought,
So was any of this stuff actually working with the pancreas and all of
some
these
of it
things?
did.
Some of
and
it
they
did?
still, the company still exists to this day. They're
Bro.
still doing their thing, but they have all new owners and they're in San Diego now.
Okay.
And they're a whole new thing. They've kind of rebooted themselves.
All right. That's a good thing.
I'm not mentioning their names because I don't feel like I don't feel like I want to get into that. But they were in Irvine, now they're in San Diego, and I have nothing to do with them anymore. I haven't been in those offices for years.
So what made you make the switch from that? So I know you from fashion, of course.
Right. Well, yeah. Okay, go ahead.
So what made you switch from that field, get out of that, and start getting into being an entrepreneur?
Well, the catalyst was, I told you I loved animals, right?
Uh-huh.
And so there was a component to this surgery and implantation and fixing the diabetic state of these primates. So they would bring me a diabetic primate, and then I would correct its diabetic state. I would get it from having a 500 milligram blood glucose, which is totally gnarly diabetes, to like a 92 range, mg per mil, whatever. And so,
No, that's bad. That's me. The host of the show's phone is ringing.
I put mine on.
Yeah, I thought I did.
I think I did. Wait, let me better check. Yeah, I did.
That's cool.
So what happened was that I was actually asked to go and do a necropsy and to take the product out of the dead animal, the animal that had died. I was not aware that they were going to euthanize the animal. I thought it was already deceased and that it failed. And I witnessed them euthanizing the animal, which was to cut the cephalic, the legs. They cut the arteries in the legs and they cut it, and it bled into a bucket. And I was mortified by the sight of it.
Oh, no.
Mortified by it. It damaged me. I'm still damaged by it. So that was the day I flew home and said, I'm out of here. Like, I'm absolutely out of here. So I didn't really understand everything that was going on. I thought that my study had died. It didn't. The product didn't work. The insulin wasn't being administered properly, and it died, which was a bummer. The surgery went well, but the animal still didn't survive. But that wasn't my fault. I wasn't creating this device. I was implanting it. So, anyways, I became depressed. And I started seeing a therapist, and I told them, I said, I'm not going to do it anymore. I'm not going to fly there anymore. Put me on the rat studies. And I started working only on the rats and just doing the rat and the mice studies. And those were a very different study. And those were a direct implantation of an organ to organ kind of thing. And it was just very different. So I'm going to be here. You guys know everything that you need to know about how to do this study. Get someone else on it. And they totally had this other kid that they lined up. And I remember watching him go to the airport, and I'm like, good luck.
Good luck.
I went back. I became depressed about it, became frustrated. And what happened was the catalyst that was really magical was someone gave me tickets to a party, and the party was for Paul Frank. And Paul Frank is a huge designer. He makes the monkey T-shirt. He's a big, big deal, and he's been killing it for years and years and years. And I knew him in art school. I knew him when we went to Orange Coast College and we studied art together. And they said, "Hey, I've got passes to this thing for Paul Frank," and I'm like, "I got to go." So I went and saw Paul, and I remember, never forget it, he looked at me, and he had to think about my name for a second because he had been Paul Frank for the past 4 years. I hadn't seen him for a while. Because I was in art school a little bit here and there, even while I was working in biotechnology.
And what were you doing in art school? Was it
just
like
doing
painting?
weird art stuff, nothing. I was just doing anything and everything I could. I was painting, I was sculpting, I was just doing anything. Basically, it was therapy.
Okay.
So it really kind of came from my therapist, like, you need an outlet.
How important do you think therapy is?
Oh, it changed everything about me.
I have a therapist, and I advocate for therapy.
Oh, it allowed me to look at myself and see who I was from an outside perspective, and I've never changed. I was so in my head the whole time that I could never really be reflective about who I was. So now I was looking at myself and going, hey, you don't want to say that, and hey, you don't want to talk to that guy, and you don't want to do that surgery anymore, I saw an interview with Lady Gaga once, and she said the same thing. She's like, I'm not going to do that, and I'm not going to go there, and I don't want to talk to that person. I was like, I remember those days. I remember when I made that decision for myself that I was going to, not be rude or, be dysfunctional or anything. I was just going to make better choices for myself and just sort of be healthy.
Yeah.
And so and that's how it unfolded. I mean, and not to get too dark or anything, but my mother died of alcoholism. She could not make good decisions for herself, and she was trapped. But she loved that I made toys and that I was doing art, and that was kind of her whole focus, was to like, okay, Shane, keep doing your thing, because I've told her, like, hey, this isn't working for me. I can't do biotechnology anymore. So I meet Paul. Paul says, I'm like, Paul, I got to get out of this job. Like, I've got to move on with my life. And he says to me these magical words. He says, you need to take my class and you need to meet this lady named Chris Amaral. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. I did that the very next morning. I got in touch with this lady, and she's been my mentor ever since. So that was 2004.
And what does Chris do?
So Chris Amaral at the time she was the head of the fashion department at Orange Coast College.
Okay.
And so that's where it all kind of started unfolding for me, was that I go from biotech to studying fashion at the community college. And it was just such a breath of fresh air. It was just a whirlwind of like, wow, this feels really good. I feel like I'm being creative again. I feel like I'm around cool and interesting people. And I always kind of thought myself like a funky dresser, and like, like I like to buy stuff at thrift stores, and I wear pink, reading glasses, and like I always kind of like to be like that. In the biotech world, I was Mr. Blue guy. Like I was always in blue or black, And this was a moment where I could have fun and be expressive. I changed my hair color. I was like living the dream, It was like, this is me. So I took this one class, and, I saw Paul, and Paul was also teaching the class. He had come back to Orange Coast College after having such powerful, amazing success with Paul Frank, and said, oh, I'm going to teach class. I'm going to inspire people. And super inspired me. And he said to me, he's like, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I said, I know that you create characters and you have this really cute character, this Julius character. I said, I actually want to create characters. It's kind of in my blood, too, because he and I are the same age. We grew up at the same time, watched the same cartoons. We were latchkey kids. We did, we watched Gilligan's Island and all the goofy stuff.
Oh, yeah, that's smart.
Right?
Yeah.
And so he said, well, this is where you need to be. And so I took that class with him, and he said, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want to make a spoof of Hello Kitty. I want to make a toy that kind of makes fun of Hello Kitty. I think that's what I want to do first. So maybe I'll do a million other things, but right now that's boiling up inside of me. Coincidentally, my name when I was a kid that my father called me was Maggot. And it was a funny, endearing name, and that kind of rolled around in my head. And
Why did he call you Maggot?
It was something he was called in the Army.
Okay.
And so he just transferred it to me like, hey, Maggot, go clean the dishes. Hey, Maggot, go wash the car. Hey, Maggot. And I thought it was funny. I didn't associate it with these gross little things that ate dead stuff.
Got you.
I thought it was my dad's funny name. When my father called me Maggot, I felt like I was not in trouble.
Okay, gotcha.
Because when I was in trouble, my name was used. When I was Maggot, I was good. So, although my mother never called me that, my father did. So, so I said, well, I don't want to do Hello Kitty. I want to do Hello Maggot. And Paul thought it was funny right away. He totally got a chuckle out of it. He said, oh, that's so funny. Like I'm like, oh, Paul thinks it's funny. I feel like I've just been anointed with like a little, magical dust from Paul Frank that says, go do that thing. So I created these little sketches. I'm in fashion class. I'm like, oh, I'm going to make these little funny T-shirts. And, they're going to say funny things. Like my favorite food is kitten McNuggets, and like, because they're maggots, they eat gross stuff. Or I love, sun-baked, possum cookies or whatever. I was just coming up with all these funny ideas, and they would make me laugh. And what they really did was they were getting me away from the dark memories of biotechnology.
Gotcha.
And so...
Well, that was really that bad?
Oh, it was horrible.
Okay.
Yeah, it was horrible. Well, again, so here's how it would work. Just not to get back into biotechnology. When I would go to do the surgery, it was the weirdest thing that ever was, and I can remember it vividly. I would walk into a room, and it was a sterile room. It was a clean room, and I had a robe on, and I had like a mask and stuff like that. And when I would walk in, I would stand in there with my hands up, and people would come around me and undress me, kind of just down to my T-shirt and my scrub pants. And they would come around, they would wrap me in this robe, and they would tie me in, and they would put the gloves on me, and they were all in sterile costumes as well. And they would gown me up, and they would put a mask on me, and then I would go through this weird smoke. I still to this day don't know what that was, but it was this weird like mist that would come down. I probably misted bleach or something, but I would walk through the room, and there would be a monkey on the table. intubated with the heart monitor and the whole thing, and then all scrubbed and ready for me to go, and all of my instruments would be there, and I would go in with the scalpel, I would open it up, and people would hand me things. So it was a very different world. I didn't have to do anything. So for me, I was like, fixing the monkey, go home. Fixing the monkey, go home. Then it shifted, and I saw what was really going on. I saw like how it kind of, the end result was really bad. They were sick and they were emaciated, and so that was where the damage came in. And then I did more homework on it as well. I went and investigated where they were kept, and I heard a story about a girl who got splashed in the face with urine, and she got hepatitis B, and she died. And
no!
Yeah, it was gnarly. It was gnarly.
Let's
yeah. So
fashion.
Anyway, so you can see I pivoted from like what to like fashion. Fashion is fun, it's frivolous, it's edgy, it's gossipy, it's color, it's rainbows, it's no rules, you know. It's following trends, but, you know, breaking rules inside of the trends is what's really cool. So I was like, I am gonna take this to the next level. So the next thing I did was I started to learn to sew. And I thought, well, you know, I'm thinking like, I want to start building a brand, and I want to base it off of this toy I'm making called Hello Maggot, because now I've got this thing in my head, and I'm pretty driven. If I have this idea, I'm like, oh, I'm going to do this idea. You know, I'm going to, like, that's the idea I'm going to do. And so I started sewing this toy, started sewing other toys. I sewed a toy for this event. It was this jeans event where you deconstructed jeans. It was for Volcom, and I turned the jeans into a fox stole. So, and I said, well, we don't want to kill animals anymore, because, you know, again, my whole process of like loving animals and things. I said, well, I'm not going to wear a fox stole of a fox. I'm going to wear it of jeans. And so I made this fox stole. I had two little friends that I worked with that still know them to this day. And we all did it together, and we won this Volcom thing. And I'm like, oh, this is my thing, man. I'm making stuff, you know. So I started creating this very simple shape. It looked like a grain of rice, and I added eyes to it. And then, you know, I started saying, look, I'm making this thing called Hello Maggot. And they wore these little T-shirts, and one of the T-shirts said, "Me so hungry," you know, from the Me So Horny. And I thought it was so funny, and everyone thought it was funny, you know. And I'm like, well, people love it. It's making people smile when they see it. And I love it. I'm feeling creative. I'm feeling like I'm in a new direction. Mind you, I had a little bit of money saved on the side, because the biotech thing paid pretty good. So I had a little chunk of change on the side. You know, I was, you know, I didn't just jump into it without any money and, like, you know, lost my, you know, apartment or anything. Although later I did have to move from my home, but it's another story. But I started just doing it. You know, I started just kind of like making it happy, and it was this incredible pivot, you know. But the thing about my toy was that Hello Kitty was a big deal. And I'm like, well, if I kind of connect myself to Hello Kitty, I sort of weirdly have built into it 40 years of Hello Kitty's nostalgia only on Hello Maggot. So people right away are like, oh yeah, Hello Maggot, it sounds like Hello Kitty. And then they kind of make an association right away. I'm like, well, that's good for me, you know?
Yeah, it is. So,
and then I thought, well, Hello Kitty's cute, we get it, Hello Kitty's adorable. I'm like, this is silly. I want to create something that's kind of like ostracized and kind of like unloved and kind of gross, but still needs to be loved, you know?
Yeah.
And like the whole thing about Hello Maggot, and I have the toy here, is that, you know, she says later, it's true you're holding a maggot, but I might not be that different from you. I'm kind, hopeful, inspired, and yet totally misunderstood. Let's be friends, let's be family.
Can I see
Yeah,
it?
so here it is.
Okay.
This is the final version that was created after selling the intellectual property, but I'll get into that selling of that intellectual property and how that worked out.
Definitely want to know how that works.
And you can have that one. That's for you.
Thank you.
And then I've made other toys as well. There's a boy version as well that I have in the car. So I realized that I was going to be on a new adventure, and I was extremely inspired by Paul Frank and his creation of his little monkey toy. Remembering that.
So Paul Frank, like he did toys and clothes, or just
he
clothes?
made everything.
Everything?
I showed a student last night all of the Paul Frank things that have ever been made, and they made glasses and swim trunks and pajamas and toys, and there's a plane that's covered with there's like a 747 plane that's covered with Paul Frank, you know, iconography and characters. It just went wild. Went wild. And Paul still is doing his thing to this day. We chat all the time about this, that, and the other. Last night we were talking about Snoopy. And it's so nice because, again, we're both in our mid-50s, and we send each other pictures of, like, Snoopy or like, a giraffe. And he's like, do you think this giraffe is cute? And I'll be like, oh my God, it's so cute. It's pretty funny. And it's such a magical thing to be doing, because it's something that we sort of share privately between each other, these little cute stories and anecdotal things about like what it means to be cute, because that's his world, is creating cute things. So, but I realized that I wanted to build the brand that he built, but I didn't want to drain Paul of all of his knowledge, and I don't want to be like a baby koala on his back.
You wanted to be an individual just with like use some of the tactics and techniques that he had.
Yeah, I wanted to start it and manifest it and let it grow, and I didn't want to cheat. I didn't want Paul. I never asked Paul to be like, hey, can you take it with you and show it at some event or whatever. Never did that. I just would say to him from time to time, he was really busy with Paul Frank at that time too. He had a lot going on, but I'd show him a picture. I'm like, do you think this is cute or do you think this is cute? And he would say things like, well, the eyes are the windows to the soul, so really make sure you get the eyes dialed in, Wow. And I was like, oh, what great advice, And so I would listen to what he was saying, but again, I was really green. I had no idea how to make a toy. I had no idea. So what I did was I just made them myself. I wanted to mass produce them. I wanted to take them and make thousands of them and give them to the world or sell them. I certainly wanted to make some money, but what I did to build my brand, what sort of came to my mind was like, well, Shane, you're going to have to go get a sewing machine and you're going to use your garage and you're going to make these things and you're just going to make them and make them and make them and make them until you get the one that you like. And then that's what I did. And I made so many once that I had 100 just throwaways. And I went to New York for a Halloween thing, and I was Jack Skellington. I was a great Jack Skellington because I'm skinny and tall. And I made the head. I'm really pretty crafty, so I made this cool head and I had the costume. And I had a whole bunch of the maggots, and I just started throwing them into the crowd. Just throwing them into the crowd. And people thought they were little ghosts because
it's Halloween.
It was Halloween, and they were white and I thought, oh, you just made the biggest mistake, Shane. You just gave away. I didn't bring the all 100, but I had like 50 or 60 in my backpack. I brought nothing. I brought like a pair of underwear and a toothbrush and like a change of clothes, and like everything else was Hello Maggot toys. What I should have did was put the word Hello Maggot on them and threw them into the crowd so people could I could start branding them. But I was naive. I didn't know. I thought somehow, some way people were going to know what they were. It still makes me laugh to this day that I threw away 50 toys and nobody was like, they were like, what are you doing? But
how important is branding initially? Like, that's your first thing you want to go after?
No, well, it's really not. So here's why. Because as a creative person, you're going to create something, and then 6 weeks later, you're going to be like, oh, no, that's not it. That's not the thing. And you really need to go through that process of, like, getting to the golden moment of, like, this is it. And so if I had, like, I wanted to make a trademark, and I wanted to patent the character, and I did all that stuff. I paid, like, $400 to try to patent it, and the patent office came back to me and said, they said two things. They're like, number one, just this, I don't know who this lady was, but she was really cool, and she wrote me this kind of candid letter, and she said, look, number one, just write TM by everything, and that kind of says this is your trademark, and that'll be pretty good for now. Don't get all into it right now. And she's like, as far as your patent concerned, I can't give you back your $400, which I paid to do a patent. She said, I wouldn't do it because there's a carrot toy, and there's a this toy, and a that toy, and they all kind of look like your toys. She said, so you don't need to patent it. It's in a very friendly way. It said, just go do your thing, I mean, I'm kind of paraphrasing, but that's how it sort of came to me. It was like, just go do your thing. And I put all that patent and trademark stuff away. I did do the TM. And so I created my little logo character of the maggot itself and put TM, and I wrote Hello Maggot and put TM, and I had my company.
So you didn't have to go through the trademark office to
I
do
didn't.
the TM?
And I wound up never having to do it because eventually I sold all of it. But I'll tell you how I sold it. I sold it because I was branding it. I was like really making people aware of it. And so what I decided that I would do was when I found the magic, when I created the one that I thought, like, I literally looked at it and went, and I'm like, this is the one. So I started talking to people like, how do I get this made? Like, what do I got to do? And Paul said, you got to meet this guy. His name is Long Gone John. So I met Long Gone John. I didn't know who he was. Turns out that he was a big, well, not that Long Gone John. He stole the name from that guy. But so Long Gone John.
He stole it from the porn star?
He stole it from the porn star, which I thought was really cool when I met him. And he said, he's a record producer. In fact, he produced the White Stripes.
Okay.
They're a big deal. And many, many, many others. I think he did the album Elephant or something. I'm not sure exactly. I don't know. But he did produce and initially kick off the White Stripes and get them started under his record label called Sympathy for the Music Industry. And so when I went to his home, it was this incredible home. He was also a wild toy designer, like he had rooms of like weird dolls, and he would have the same doll and had hundreds of them, and they all had these staring eyes. And he had secret rooms where he had a room where he opened it was literally a bookshelf, and if you pushed it, it opened up to another room. He was one of those kinds of people.
Okay.
Lots of money, really, really cool, eccentric as anyone the most eccentric person you would probably ever could meet, you know. And we just hit it off. And one of his favorite things to do, of all things, was go to the soup plantation because you could get as much food as you wanted
for free.
For pretty much for free if you paid your one price. And this guy was a millionaire, you know, but he was one of those people that was like a millionaire, but he liked to get like extra brownies and like, you know. So we were just fast friends. We were like fast friends. And he actually also, when I first met him, I was making the doll by hand, and I was getting them into stores. One store in particular was called Electric Chair in Huntington Beach, and they were like the coolest store that ever was. They had like the edgiest Doc Martens you've ever seen that were like spray painted and funky, and they had like T-shirts that were weird with holes in them, and Godzilla toys. They had all this cool stuff. I mean, it's called Electric Chair, right? So you already get it. And I told them about my product, and they were like, oh, we love it. Like, we want to sell your Hello Maggots. So I gave them my Hello Maggots. Long Gone John heard about it, bought them all, because he likes to buy everything.
Okay.
So he bought them all, and I was like, well, they took forever to make. I only made $6 on each one. I didn't care, you know. And they gave me my little check for $18, and I was doing my little dance, because I sold something.
Yeah.
You know, I was like, well, I sold something. And somebody bought it, and somebody bought all of them, which didn't really prove that I could sell them, because this one eccentric man bought all of them. I wanted to see if everybody would buy them. So he connected me to someone named Dove Kellermer or DKE Toys, or I think it was DKE, Dove Kellermer Enterprise, DKE.
Okay.
And DKE, I made another sample, and I brought it to them, and DKE liked it. And they're like, wow, it's really, really fun. And so this time I was making those toys, those maggots. Those are the final version of them, but I was making them much smaller, and they would wear little pajamas. And the joke was that they would eat something that they found, because, you know, they eat dead things, and then they would make the skin their pajamas. And so instead of looking like a maggot, they look like a baby mouse. Or instead of looking like a maggot, they look like a baby bunny. Okay. So they have little eyes popping through a little hole, and they had a bunny costume or a rat costume. And DKE saw it and was like, wow, these are wild. Like, okay, I'm going to set you up with this manufacturer, and you go do your thing. And so through mailing the toy to this manufacturer and like trying to get the prototype, so they would make me one.
Where would you get the manufacturing? Was it in China?
It's a Chinese company,
okay.
Yeah. Now, the thing about making stuff in China is there's a lot of, you know, people will argue that don't do it. This was in 2007. This was a long time ago. Let me tell you something. You can't make a toy in the United States. It's way too expensive, and they don't have the infrastructure to do it. And I tried. I tried. They made horrible versions of my toys. I took it to China, bing, bang, boom. Like, they would send me back samples, and they looked way better than mine.
Wow.
And I'm like, oh, I'm on to something now. Like, I just got chills just now. And this was years ago that they sent it to me, and I was like, I would look at my toy and go, ah, and I'd look at their toy and be like, wah! And like, oh, they got the eyes embroidered, and the hair was really cool, you know, and it just looked good, and it fit perfectly in there. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have a ton of money, but through a little bit of wheeling and dealing, because I'm always a little bit of a car salesman on the side like that. My dad was like, it's okay to be a bit of a car salesman, you know? And I'd be like, well, I need to make these, and I need to try to sell them, and I need to make, how many do I need to make? And like, well, you can make 500 for this much, you can make 1,000 for this much, 1,500, whatever. That's the deal. I'm like, well, let's go down the middle. I'm going to make 1,000. I'm going to make 500 pink mice, 500 brown bunnies. So I did it, and paid them the money.
So that way you could split you wouldn't have to get that size bulk order of one.
Well, I wanted to have some variation.
You were able to split it down the middle, so you wouldn't have to do like 2 huge bulk orders.
Well, what I wanted was, they wanted to work with me, and I wanted to work with them, and they said, we'll charge you, like, it was literally like, we'll charge you 3 cents more, but we'll make a different version of the same thing. And I'm like, and I love strawberry shortcake. Like, I'm addicted to strawberry shortcake. I've collected every one of the toys.
Okay.
And I love their vintagey vibe. And strawberry shortcake is the same doll over and over and over again with different hair. And I'm like, wow, it's so smart. Same with Barbie or whatever. This is the same toy over and over. And I thought that model worked for me, and my toys were colorful and cute, although weird. So I said, okay, let's do it. So I made the 1,000. I had them shipped to my distributor, and he was like, wow, this is going to be fun. Let's see what happens. So I'm thinking the whole time, well, I need to brand them. This is a really great step for people to see them. And at this point, I've had the original card that went with them that said, the name wasn't even Hello Maggot at the time. The name was, I called the character Maggie. And I wasn't using the name Hello Maggot. It was there, but I was just calling her Maggie. Later, Disney did a show called Maggie, and I was always irked by it because it came out several years later of a little girl Fly, and she had a little baby brother Maggot. And I was like, seems kind of like they might have seen my toy, but I don't know. I don't want to accuse anybody of anything, but the mouse. But so he said that on the first night he sold 400.
Really?
And I was like, well, oh my God. He said, you know what, Shane? It's the most I've ever sold of any toy ever at one time that much. Now, it wasn't that expensive. They were selling for like $7 and I was making $3.50.
So this was in the store.
So now they were in the stores.
So let me ask you, where were their placement inside the
weird,
store?
funky toy stores and head shops, like weird T-shirts. There was a store called Wacko.
No, were they like close to the register, or did they have?
Where were they in the store?
Yeah.
Oh, they were anywhere and everywhere.
Okay.
They could be anywhere and everywhere. And I remember walking into a store called Puzzle Zoo, and I'll never forget it. I walked in and somebody was buying it when I walked in.
Wow.
And the lady, it was a little boy, and the mom said to me, I said, "Oh, cool, you're buying Hello Maggot, like right on, And she said, well, he doesn't, this was a little kid that was buying it. She goes, well, he doesn't know it's a maggot, and I'm not going to tell him. And I was like, wow, this is hilarious. They think it's a mouse,
Really?
And it was cute, and it was funny, and it came out of the thing. He knew it came out, but he didn't know what he was dealing with. And
Kids
the mom...
don't know what maggots are.
He didn't know
like
what
that.
it was. He just knew it came out of the pajamas and it was white. I mean, I think he thought it was the mouse's soul or something, And I thought, well, I don't care. Make of it what you want, And so a little bit in that respect, I was kind of branding it without doing anything. But I wanted to go big. Like, I wanted to really make it happen. So what I realized was that I didn't have any business cards. I didn't have any kind of promotion. All I had was the toy. And I thought, well, great, it's great. I'm selling the toys from South America. Like, he sold them all over the world. People in Japan bought them. People in Germany bought them. Everybody was buying them. Now, I only had 1,000, but they were all over the world.
They were selling.
And I was getting emails from people from South America going, we love the pajamas, and like, can you make me a special one? And I was like, cool. And it would be this broken English, and I'm like, wow, you emailed me from Brazil,
Wow.
And my whole world was changing. And for fun, I was making other toys. I made a toy called Sperm, and it was a little sperm, and I made a toy called Bandage and Scab, because I was trying to keep busy in between, because I didn't have the money to rebuy more Hello Maggots, because I was selling what I had made, and so I was making I made a toy called Roast Chicken.
Did you put these on any T-shirts or anything?
I didn't initially. Later I did, but I did do a T-shirt. I did a T-shirt called Unhappy Star, where I took the Carl's Jr. star and turned it upside down and made it satanic. And I made it unhappy. And what it really was the politics of Shane saying, stop eating animals.
Okay.
So, because I was always about that. So
You're
I wanted
vegetarian.
I wanted to put like a stink on it, so I made the Unhappy Star. Those did really well. Those were cool, but I was kind of infringing on the copyright a little too much, so I kind of put those aside and ended those. But what happened was when I wanted to brand, or when I wanted to go back and like really try to kick off Hello Maggot, social media was there. I had a website presence, and I would sell them from time to time. But the thing that I tell students when I say to them, I don't think I ever mentioned that I was a teacher here, but that's fine.
Cool.
Yeah. When I tell students now, I say, how are you going to brand? What are you going to do? And they're like, oh, I'm going to get on TikTok. And I'm like, yeah, but okay, great. How? They're gonna, like, it's going to explode on TikTok. I'm like, how is it going to explode? You know, like, what are you going to do to make it explode?
I don't know how that works because I make movies. I do a bunch of things. I have a movie where I play Clarence Thomas in the movie, and I put a big rubber penis on somebody's shoulder. I put that clip out, and it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. So I don't know how those algorithms work. And it was when Clarence Thomas was at like the new height of a new scandal with the
because he's always good.
with the Donald Trump
scandals,
stuff.
Yeah.
So I wrote this script, and I was shooting it. And I had wrote it about Clarence Thomas because I was alive during the initial scandal with Anita Hill. So I wrote him, you know, he's supposed to put like pubic hair in her Coca-Cola.
In Anita Hill's Coke. Yeah. Well, he said there was pubic hair in his Coke.
Yeah.
Something like that, which is
weird.
Which is weird.
So I wrote it where he accidentally he runs out the bathroom and he forgets to put his penis away and he puts it on her shoulder. And she's like, "Get your thing off my shoulder." It's in my movie Trouble in the Culture.
Oh, I gotta see it.
I'll send it to you.
I gotta see that one. I can't stand Clarence Thomas.
It went to Newport. And that didn't do anything. It didn't do anything like I thought it would do. So I don't know how you get like this big explosion on TikTok.
We're gonna do something together. I can already feel we're gonna do a fun thing together, and we're gonna do a fun thing together. I write weird stuff all the time, and
I'm with it.
We'll do something fun when there's like a moment where we can just both relax. I'm gonna say, hey, I got this idea. Let's film this.
Got you.
So we're gonna do that for sure.
But I don't understand like what makes these things click. Well, what makes them go?
So that's the thing. So
and after they go, how do you sustain that momentum?
Okay, well, I mean, there's 100 different ways to do that. You can watch the video by Shepard Fairey on how he kind of programmed people to see the Obey poster, where he did it. You know, he made an almost free poster and then put it everywhere, realizing that if people saw things 3 times, they would be like, okay, I know this company, Obey. I love the message, Obey. Got to buy their product. You know, and he did really well. Shepard Fairey did really, really well. I love to use him as an example of of branding and kind of programming people to experience it and accept it and have it in their lives, you know. So, but I didn't know what to do. So I took a backpack, I put toys in it, I took little business cards, and Paul Frank told me this in an interview that he did, a little lecture he did for one of our classes. He said, I hit the pavement, and he said, I brought my bag and I started giving people my wallets. And I'm like, well, if I'm going to have this experience with Paul Frank and learn from him, that's going to be the thing I'm going to learn, is that, you know, go hit the pavement and give people your product and see what they do. So I would go to like Black Maria Art Gallery, or I would go to like a Wacko toy store opening, and I'd be like, hey, check out my toy, you know, or I'd meet new people. And Wacko already sold my toy, but I wanted them to know it was me, and I wanted them to experience me. And the really magical thing is when they would meet me, if they knew my toy already, it was like the red carpet would roll up, like, oh my God, you're the guy that makes Sperm Toy and Hello Maggot and chickens and all this stuff. And it was such a magical feeling, especially coming from such a dark previous experience.
Yeah.
And so I was like, this is my vibe, this is my jam. But again, nobody was really seeing me. So what I did was I started meeting everybody I possibly could, just gave away the damn toy. I was like, I don't care. I still have a couple hundred left. I'm just going to give them to cool people. You know, and that worked. I'm telling you right now, that worked. Like, you know, you can't just give it to like random Joe on the street at the bus stop. Maybe you can. Maybe you got lucky. You got to kind of go to the cool places and kind of meet the cool people. And you don't just always have to meet the CEO. You can meet like assistants or kind of anyone. You know, there's amazing people out there all over the place. But you have to have some thought process as to like, I'm going to go to this art show because I know that it's all character based, or it's a weird and wacky show about like barf or whatever, you know. And I'm going to go and be there because that's my people. Go where your people are.
This is my reason for, you know, I act, I do music, this and that. It's my reason for getting in the media, because getting in the media gets you into places that you typically wouldn't be able to get into.
My toy was my golden ticket. I would hold up my toy and I'd be like, hey, I'm Shane, I'm from Hello Maggot. Or what I would say is, hey, I'm Purple Flavor, which was what I had named my company. I got Hello Maggot. And that would let me in the door all the time, because the owners of these places would be like, you know what? They eventually started hearing of me, and they knew DKE. And again, I was in the realm of my people. I wasn't at a Gucci show. You know, I was in a wacky, weird sock convention where they were making weird socks or making weird art. And so I started branding myself in that way. I started giving out my toys and really pushing the concept and saying, like, this is me, you know, this is my jam, this is what I want to do. And the thing that I did that really kind of set it on fire was that I made these really, really limited edition ones. They were called the Alley Rat Edition. And they were these dirty alley rat ones. And I thought, oh, let's make them edgy and let's make them weird. And I placed them at Comic-Con. And Comic-Con gets 3 million people. In like 4 days they get, or it's like 3 million people will walk through. I think it's even more now, but 3 million people will go through the hallways of Comic-Con. And I made a deal with DKE. I'm like, look, I don't want any money. You can sell them and you can take it. I said, but put them on the countertop. I put them on this little stand, put the words Alley Rat Edition, and then put them all, and everyone had a different flower. So if you bought one, you got an original one. Everyone was different. They all had this big, weird, clown-like flower. Sold them all. But you know who bought them was Lisa Henson from The Muppets and Michael Polis from Wild Brain, who did Yo Gabba Gabba.
Is that Jim Henson's daughter?
Jim Henson's daughter. And I remember, and I'll never forget it, was that I was standing in the hallways, and here comes this man I know named Dave Pressler. He's a really big deal also. He's a creative person that I knew. And he walks out, and here comes this lady, and I didn't know who Lisa Henson was. And she walks up to him, and she takes my toy and goes, wiggle, 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 right in his face. And I was like, Dave, that's my toy. And he goes, oh, yeah, man. And he's like, this is my wife, Lisa. And I was like, oh, my God, that's Lisa Henson.
Wow.
And I'm like, weird, like, it worked, you know? Like, putting myself out there, not wanting any money, getting myself into the groove, you know, was like, it worked.
Once Jim Henson's daughter picks up your toy and starts playing, that's an honor in itself.
It was so cool. I wound up going to Lisa Henson's house to a pool party.
I mean, I don't know about now, but just imagine the stuff that was around when she was growing up with her dad.
I went to her house.
Kermit the Frog.
You have no idea. I went to her house. I went to the brother's house. I can't remember his name, and I don't want to say it wrong, but Lisa had one house in LA/Hollywood, and the brother had another one. I want to say it was Dave Henson. I can't remember his name. But it was Lisa and the two brother and sister. And they had this little thing they were doing called Puppet Up, and they had this cute little thing they were doing. It was really fun. It wasn't little. It was a big deal, but it was cool. And I went to one of the homes, and there was the original Miss Piggy, the original Frank Oz puppeted Piggy above the toilet. And I was just out of my mind because I love the Muppets, you know.
Who does?
And I would walk around.
Doesn't?
Oh my God, I was out of my mind.
It's like an American treasure.
Oh, and I was a toy designer, and I was like me. And Jim's picture was on the wall, and I had another funny story I'll tell you in 2 seconds. I brought my friend with me. His name was Nick, and I'm like, you got to come with me because I'm nervous. I'm going to go to the Henson's house. And he was like, oh, what a great idea. So I bring him with me. He was an out-of-control, unbelievable Jim Henson collector, and I had no idea. He was completely out of his mind in their house because he had every Muppet toy that ever was. He even made toys that were puppets.
Okay.
And I didn't know this, but anyways, I brought him. It's funny because he would not leave them alone. I was like, oh God, I shouldn't have brought him here. But they did not option to buy it. They didn't buy it. They saw it and they liked it, and we talked about it, and they thought it was funny. What happened was Wild Brain, who were the creators of Aquabats and Yo Gabba Gabba, they came to me first. I felt like the Hensons wanted it. Later, I pitched them other shows, and but Wild Brain came to me, and one day on my email, it was like, hello, Shane, we're Wild Brain Entertainment. We're part of Yo Gabba Gabba, and we saw your toy at Comic-Con. I was like, ooh. You know, I'm like, it worked. I just kept saying it worked. And that was in 2008. 9, 10, by 11, they bought it.
Wow.
They bought Hello Maggot. And I was still promoting and I was also making other toys, but I had to kind of get away from Hello Maggot. I had to leave it in the magical moment that it was in because I didn't want to mess it up. So the only thing I did was I made an alien version and I made like some more like high-end versions, like more fanciful versions, like with like they had ruffles under their dress, and I would mail them these like really elaborate toys because they would go through this phase of like, we really love your toys, let's meet. I'd drive to LA, we'd meet, we had these roundtable meetings with all these executives. I'd talk to them about my toy, I'd show them all these drawings that I did, and then I'd go home, didn't hear from them for months.
Okay.
And then they'd call, and then I'd be like, okay, you know what, Shane? Send them more toys. Keep branding yourself. Keep letting them know you have. I would put them in like a skull pajama. Like I'd make this big skull and they'd fit inside of it, and they would call like the, it was called the skull pajama, you know, or the skull jamas, and I'd send them that, and they'd be like, oh my god, and I'd get an email from them immediately, you know, and they'd be like, we love it, you know, we talk on the phone. And in 2011, they were purchased by DKE Media. Wild Brain was purchased, and so that snafu'd everything. But I eventually got in there. I wound up getting an agent in Hollywood. I have a natural talent as my agent. And I'm like, you guys, I cannot navigate these contracts. I don't know what's going on. And I showed them. They're like, okay, this looks legit. We're gonna go ahead and take you into our firm because you can't just get an agent in Hollywood. Like you gotta come from somewhere. But I knew the Hensons, and they backed me up a little bit. I'm like, well, I know Lisa. She could tell you I'm cool, you know? And the husband, Lisa's husband, wrote my agents a letter and were like, Shane's cool, like you should work with him. So that's kind of all it took, but that was huge.
Yeah,
that
cool.
you need that. But again, that was giving away my toys and like talking about
and
myself.
networking.
Networking
is important.
Networking and branding myself. So Wild Brain bought the entire intellectual property that my name, everything was taken away from me. And
how important is it being social and being able to network? Like
it's everything, and that's the catch-22 is a lot of my friends that are creatives are on the spectrum, and they cannot communicate. They shut down when it comes to communication, and that's why I always say bring a wingman. Bring a friend that likes to blah blah blah. Find the spectrum friend that's the opposite of you that can't shut up.
Got
you know?
you.
And the two of you together can make like a nice little balance, a yin and yang of like, you know, oh my God, have you seen this toy? This is the guy that made it. And then you shake hands, and then that guy disappears, and that worked. I happen to be a big mouth. I'm really quiet. I can be I can be a fly on a wall, or I can just be like Chatty Cathy.
I feel like I'm a good networker. I feel like I'm great at it.
You are.
I feel like I can move into a room, I can talk to people, I can get their information, and I can get a follow-up, or I'll be able to follow up with people and create a relationship.
You are that guy from the World's Most Interesting Man commercials.
Who,
you literally remind me of the guy, the world's most interesting man. I'm like,
the Dos Equis commercials?
Yeah, I'm like, that's him right there. As soon as we met, I'm like, oh man, you need to be in that commercial because you are that guy. You are captivating. And you are an enigma at the same time, but you're really interesting.
Thank you.
And so you have kind of like the perfect moment. And we kind of hit it off right away. It was like, let's talk about this. And I don't have the magical answer because everybody's different on how they want to create their thing. You know, like everyone has this different thing that they want to do. I was a toy maker. But I'd love to tell you one more funny story. As I moved away from Wild Brain, and they went on and they produced the toy that you have now with the dress, and they made a boy, and they made a really cute boy version. I designed all of it, but they went on and manufactured. This was really nice. I didn't have to pay for it. I didn't have to do anything. I just had to give. I took money from Wild Brain and shifted it to this company that made the original ones. I paid them more. I was giving them like a thank you for making me the original toy. I'm like, oh, you don't have to make them for $3 anymore. Let's just make them for $5, you know? Because I was like, screw it, you know, this is their money, and I'm gonna spend a little money, and I'm gonna make them extra. But that company was really cool. They're like, well, we're gonna make little buttons, and we're gonna give them extra hair.
So they took that extra $2
they took
you were
that extra
giving
$2
them
and they made it even better.
Enhanced the toy.
They made that doll stands on its own. You can stand her up on her own. Stand her up. She'll stand. Give her a little scrunch, but she'll stand on her own.
I see.
So they did that.
And it doesn't
for me.
look like it's supposed to do that.
It doesn't look like it stands. She stands on her own. She has little beans on the bottom. And you know, you give and take, you know? You give someone a little something and they give you something back more magical.
How hard is it to find good manufacturing?
It's rough.
It's rough.
A lot of people go to Alibaba, and Alibaba can be dicey. It can be great, but it can be dicey. You got to do your homework. You know, you can't go in there and throw a bunch of money at people. You got to negotiate. You say, hey, I've got this thing. Don't show them all of it. Like, this is super high. I didn't show them the face, and I didn't show them the cape, and I didn't show them the card. I'm like, can you just make this shape? And they thought it was a maple leaf.
No.
So, and then I'm like, okay, I found the company that can make the leaf. I'm like, okay, well, now you got to add this face. And it's called Super High, and make the card and put the cape. And there's a Heidi version, too. There's a girl version of it, too.
Can I see that?
This was the next thing I pivoted to. Now, this was one of those situations where I also gave it away, and Snoop Dogg got a hold of it. And Snoop Dogg took a picture with it, and he had 80,000 likes immediately. And that was cool.
Let me ask
really
you,
cool.
when you get something like Snoop Dogg posting your toy and it's getting 80,000 likes, how do you capture that moment and turn it into
Well, at this
money?
point, so with that toy, I kind of moved away from really promoting that toy, partly because I'm a teacher at a community college. I still talk about it. I just don't like beat a drum for it anymore. I used to beat a drum for Hello Maggot. I used to beat a drum for all my other toys. This one I kind of shied away from, and I work with someone else. His name is Michael Polis. He's super cool, and he kind of took over a lot of that stuff and said, I'm going to take this image and I'm going to run with it. I'm going to show it on the website. For me personally, it was just street cred.
Do you ever walk by any of these students and smell them?
Yeah,
so you shouldn't mind.
Well, here's the thing about that. So I told you my mother died of alcoholism. My mother told me before she died, if she could have continued using cannabis, she would have lived. The alcohol ruined her body. Alcohol is insidious.
Yeah.
If you really understand what alcohol does, it breaks the blood-brain barrier, it destroys cells, it breaks you down molecule by molecule. Where THC just kind of makes you happy.
Yeah.
It can make you sad too.
Or hungry.
Or hungry, yeah.
Yeah.
And my mom was a muncher. She was a munchaholic. But she told me before she died I would have made it. And there was partly an homage to my mother having died. Also, I had a friend that was dying of cancer who was being discouraged from using cannabis. And when the two of them kind of came together, I'm like, I got to figure out how I can put a happier face on this product. So again, I'm all about politics. I'm all about a subversive message.
With California being one of the greatest weed places in the world.
Right.
People love California for weed.
Well, I grew up in Long Beach, a.k.a. Bong Beach.
Yeah, home of Snoop Dogg.
Right, California, Long Beach. I grew up in that environment. So for me, I wasn't feeling the stress of like, oh my God, you're making this cannabis toy. I was like, yeah, whatever, like.
Will these sell in these smoke shops?
They sell everywhere.
Okay.
But smoke shops love them. You know what smoke shops do is they give them away when you buy their product. They're like, oh, well, we just give them away.
Okay, but they purchase them.
They buy them from me.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I used to sell boxes of them because they had so much money. It was the first time because there's been several versions of that toy. There's the original version. There's the new Heidi, the new improved Heidi, and then there's the Super High.
The curl.
There's also Junior High, Lemon High, Strawberry Kush High. There's all these different highs. High Five, Hiawatha. I did everything, but the cannabis industry was like, oh, we want to buy boxes of them. I would sell them 250 at a time in boxes of like
250 at what price point for
$5?
Oh wow,
$5, and you can sell them for 20. But they didn't care. They made so much money. They didn't even care.
Off weed.
They didn't care.
Yeah.
They didn't care. And I was like, cool. I mean, I paid off my car. I refied my house. Like I did.
Oh, I want to talk to you
now
about that.
Now everybody makes that, by the way. People make cannabis toys with little faces all day long.
Is this also for me?
You can have it,
okay,
of course.
I've
got a girl version too, and I have a limited edition lemon kush that you can have. I'll bring them to you next time we connect. I want you to have the whole collection.
I appreciate that because I wish I can get you to autograph these.
Of course.
I want to talk to you about your transition from that into what you do. Like I think it's real estate.
I do dibble dabble in real estate for sure. I do own apartment buildings and I have some homes, and a little bit of the money that I made kind of helped facilitate that. My mom did leave me some money when she died, not a lot, but enough to kind of help to make it work. But that is for me like more of like the future. I don't really make a lot of money off that real estate because they're apartments. If you know about real estate and you know what it costs to run apartments, like you don't make a ton of money. You make equity, and you can make a little bit of passive income. I mean, I'm not saying it's been terrible or anything. I mean, I have a home in Laguna Beach that overlooks the ocean. I did okay. But I haven't sold anything. It's all just kind of building equity slowly. And again, they're really they're not cranking dollars out. There's a lot, like you repair a roof and you're out 40 grand.
Yeah.
You know, we're repairing a roof right now and I'm like, I don't really have 40 grand. Like I would rather buy something else. What I'd really rather do is start my next toy, which is called Budfoot, which is a Sasquatch Bigfoot, but from the cannabis, a forest from the cannabis world. So it's Bigfoot, but he lives amongst the cannabis leaves. You know, he lives amongst the pot leaves and he's called Budfoot. I got a TM on that, by the way, so don't try to grab it.
No.
But, not you. We're going to make t-shirts of that. But yeah, I do dibble dabble in real estate. I tell all my students, I'm like, look, if you can buy a little piece of real estate, buy it right now. Buy a little condo. And the way we did it, me and my partner, my husband of 30 years, I'm married. I'm a gay man and I'm married, out and proud. Don't give a few shits about it. So, but I'm married to a man. We've been buying real estate here, there, and everywhere. We got roommates all over the place to help us make those payments. Like we would rent out every room and we'd take the smallest, crummiest room and the crummiest bathroom and we'd be like, here, take the master bedroom with the master bath, but pay $1,400 a month because our payment's $1,800 a month, you know?
I know a guy I worked for back in the day. I used to own a moving company, but I got the idea from a guy named Mike. He had a moving company called Mike Movers. And I got this idea. It's almost like anywhere I've worked, I've watched how it worked, and if I was interested in it, I'd be like, I could do this. I'm going to do this on my own. I don't need to do this with you. What bothered me about working for Mike was that, let's say I did a move for Mike, me, and then another guy, and we would bring him home like $2,000 for the day, and he would peel off $150, give me $150, give him $150, and I was like, this is not making sense.
Right.
He's home in his house that he paid for because he did what you did. He rented out every room in his house. He took a room. He had a swimming pool at this house. He had everything. But he would rent the rooms out, and they paid off his house.
Yeah. Look, man, you got to do the things that other people don't want to do. And you look at the world today, and it's like the husband and the wife and the 2.3 kids, and they're like, I can't rent out a room. You know, like I don't want to rent out my room. I got kids living here. And I'm like, I get it. I wouldn't rent out my room either. I mean, or maybe your brother might want to rent it out. I don't know. Maybe someone that you really trust. That's pretty rare. But you know, we could rent to college students, or we could rent to a nurse.
I rent a room in a house. It's an old lady. She doesn't live in a house. I think she lives in like a trailer in Oceanside. Beautiful trailer neighborhood where like the older people live. I rent the house with 3 other guys. One guy, he doesn't come into the house. He has like a private entrance around the back. It's his own thing. There's an older guy who lives downstairs, and I have a guy who stays across from me. I live in Lake Forest. The rooms are huge. And somebody was like, why don't you move out? I was like, no, my room has like been updated with like new flooring, this and that. It's a huge room. I have a studio in there. I have my weight set in the garage. It's like, why would I go pay an extra $1,500 a month to have an apartment that won't allow me to have the space that I have? It's not like these guys are old. I'm sorry, fellas, but they're like 50s, 60s. The other guy, he doesn't even come into the house. He doesn't use the kitchen or anything. Why would I? That's something most people wouldn't want to do, is rent a room. The house is clean. I don't have any issue. The guy who stays across from me, he works 90% out of town. So if he's in town for 3-4 days, he's gone with his job. Why would I give up paying $1,100 a month?
I agree. I mean, that's the thing about being a creative person. It's like, find that niche thing that like nobody really wants to do. Like, get creative and then swallow your pride a little bit. So what? You got a roommate. I mean,
I have a full studio in there.
There you go.
A full studio.
I mean, people have been renting out rooms since rooms were invented. You know, It's like, I remember, I don't know what movie it was I saw as a kid, but the little lady in the movie was like, well, we rent out to boarders. And I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. Because then you got someone in the house that's interesting, and like, you know, you have someone new to talk to. And like, I mean, it's been great. Like,
I have a cousin who's recently getting into real estate in Pennsylvania. And he said he made the biggest mistake of his life with his father-in-law told him, don't buy a house, buy a triplex, buy a duplex, stay in one of them, rent the rest of them out. So
yep, totally.
I was talking to him about buying a house. and he was like, don't do it. Don't buy a single family home. This is what you do. And I said, well, that sounds perfect. That's like some of the best advice I got. To buy a duplex or a triplex, live in part of it, let the person who's renting it out pay for it.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. I own 2 duplexes and then I own 2 additional houses, and the houses are a pain.
Yeah.
Because what happens is when one person leaves in the duplex, well, it's 2 duplexes, so it's a 4plex, but when one person leaves, you still got the other 3 generating income and you're not hit. When they leave the house,
it's over.
There's nothing going on, and you got to pay that mortgage. And I'm like, you got to be smart. You got to save money for a rainy day. I mean, I drive a Mazda 2. I bought it used. My partner drives a used car as well. We're not the fanciest people. We make our own dinners at home. We're really frugal. But you gotta be smart. You gotta be wise. We could have bought BMWs. We could have bought Teslas. Like, absolutely not.
I have a dream. My dream not Martin Luther King, right?
You literally said it. Yeah, you just said it.
My dream is, ultimately to have my studio where I can make movies and build sets and things of that nature, kind of like a compound. But that's for work. My dream is to live in 3 states. And I want to have a duplex or triplex in each place that I want to live, which is here in New York and Atlanta. So I want to buy, so that way I can always have a place to go when I go, because these are the places that I would, for the line of business I want to be in, these are the places that I would travel to probably the most.
Well, what I would do is I would tell whoever was in like 405 Unit A, I would say, hey, you can rent this, but I just want you to know that room is always empty, and within 24 hours notice, I may be here. And you just let them know, and they're more than likely they'll be like, cool, you're not here for 6 months, and for like 5 days you're living in that room. Cool. So you got to make sure you set that up, but you got to be careful when you have property all over the place, because if something goes wrong and you're in Atlanta and like the other one's in Las Vegas, and you're like, oh man, like I got to go deal with that. My property.
I don't think I would deal with it. Because the type of money I'm trying to make, I would get a rental, one of those.
You can get a property manager. They'll rip you off all day long. They're telling you they are shady. They're shady. You better get a really, really good one. Unless she's like Mother Teresa, they always looking to see how they can get extra money out of you. What you really need are really good handymen that you trust. You don't need
superintendent.
And you could maybe make the guy that you say, hey, I'm going to live here part time. You could make him the guy. He's sort of the property manager. You could say, I'm going to cut your rent in half. That room is always mine, but you're going to also pay attention to the property. Okay. So that would be the way to do it. You don't need a property manager that you pay 10% for every unit. Get that out of the equation.
Okay.
You're good to go. But yeah, you're going to need to, from time to time, have to go and look at your property. I was looking at a place in Washington. I'm like, I'm not buying it. I don't want to fly to Washington to go look at whatever it is that needs to be looked at. Now, mostly it can be handled by the handyman, but there are times when you got to go there and you need to figure out what to do. Like You can have that dream. I was broke. I lived in a little tiny apartment in Long Beach. I had no money, never had. I've always been kind of broke, and I just made the most of my dollars. I took all my we bought a Freddie. I don't remember what the loan was that we got, but we got a first-time buyer loan. We bought a $150,000 home. This was years ago, but we had to come up with $7,000, which we borrowed from parents. But we got into that house, immediately rented out rooms to the sisters. And, then took the equity on that, bought another property, took the equity on that property, bought the apartments, took the equity on that, bought the other houses, So you can leverage your debt and you can leverage your equity. You just got to be smart. But I have never really had any money. I've just been smart about how to move it around.
I want to bring you back up here just to talk about real estate.
Sure, it would be fun. I'll tell you some great stories.
We are just about out of time for this episode.
Sure, we'll come back.
I wish we had more time because this has been dope. You're one of my first interviews.
Cool.
You're like my second or third.
Okay, cool.
And this is really cool. We're going to make history with this one because this has been really great.
Yeah, we were all over the place, from science to real estate to toys and toys in the middle. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell. So
I'd like to thank my guest, Shane Neilson. I'm Jamal Brown, and this show is called I the Creative, and we will be back with more creative people. And thanks for listening.